there, my name's James Marsh. I'm Managing Director of Andromeda Metals. We are a South Australian-based mining company. We are a near-term producer. Our vision is to become a world leader in the production and supply of high-quality premium industrial minerals and their use in downstream nanotechnologies, which will improve the environment and improve the life for everybody around.
James, thank you very much for the introduction. Nice to meet you. You spent the last 3 years in Australia, but I believe you're in a hotel room in London now. You've got out.
Correct, yes. Well, I've been unable to travel here for 3 years, but now I'm out on the loose and getting the word out, the good news out about Andromeda to Europe. And I'll be spending next 3 weeks traveling around Europe, speaking to a lot of hopefully interested and influential people.
Well, good. Well, good to have you on Crux. And looking through your presentation, looking through your company, I see that there are three kind of key branches to this, or kind of three component branches of Andromeda. You've got the industrial minerals side of the business. You've just put out a feasibility study on Great White, the Kaolin Project there. You've got a metals division, and you've got the nanotechnology. Now, I kind of understand a bit more about the metal side of the business. But from what I can see, the two key drivers for you in the near and medium term and long term are the kaolin business, the Great White Project, and the nanotechnologies. So hopefully we'll be able to cover those today.
That's correct. Yeah. So the industrial minerals business, which is, as you quite rightly said, we've just released our definitive feasibility study on the Great White Kaolin Project. That's the key to our industrial minerals business and the start of it. That is the base case start of the business. That's intimately related to the nanotechnology side of our business as well. So those two are very interrelated, they're dependent on each other. The plan is to use cash flow from the Great White Project to commercialize a number of nanotechnologies, which are very exciting new technologies, which we'll talk about. And we also have, in the middle, we have our metals section, which we call our harvest section. We've got a copper project there, 2 gold projects, and one of those is now a rare earth elements project as well. So those represent potentially some very high value for us, but we're going to harvest those and use any capital from that to assist the other sides of our business.
When you say harvest, do you mean that you're looking for farm out partners? You're looking to sell the projects, or are you looking to develop them as yourselves and kind of take them up the capital curve? Or is it a capital cash out business now, or a capital in? What's your plan for those projects?
Yes, definitely no capital in for those. We are using those for capital out, if anything. So we have at the moment the copper project and the gold / rare earth project. We already have partners there, joint venture partners, who are running those, managing those, and funding those on a farm-in basis. And then we have a gold project, North Queensland, that we're talking to 2 or 3 interested parties at the moment to see how they want to get involved with that gold project. So yeah, certainly from our side, there's nothing coming in from our side apart from communications.
Good. Now, the feasibility study that you've just put out a month ago, more or less, early April, it gave we're going to speak in Aussie dollars throughout this, just for simplicities. It gave a value of $613 million NPV, 36% IRR. It's obviously a really tricky time to publish any feasibility study because kind of cost inputs are all over the show. Kind of energy prices, concrete prices, steel prices. It's a tricky time. Can you explain how did he manage that process? And obviously you've got that. There are 2 variables here. One is the kind of the revenues you're going to get from your product, which are bouncing around a bit, and the other is your cost inputs. And so those 2 kind of key factors are going to affect your margins. Can you just kind of explain a little bit how you handled that in the feasibility process?
Yeah, well, you're quite right. It's a tricky time to do this sort of study right now. The world, as we know it, is not the same as it was when we first started this. And when we put our pre-feasibility out a couple of years ago, the world was a very different place. So it meant that we had to put a tremendous amount of work into the DFS to try and get the structure, the size, and all of the issues around that at just the right level to make this something that we were very confident in being able to achieve, but also at the right size to make it very interesting and give us some significant cash flow for the business. So that caused a bit of a problem because the PFS was so different. The DFS was really starting from scratch again. And there was seemed to be a lot of market misunderstanding of what we're trying to do there, and also the numbers we put out, because we were comfortable those numbers were good numbers. And as a DFS, standalone DFS, for an Australian mining project, it looked very strong and very robust. And the messaging around that was, yeah, this is a base case as well. This is not the best possible study we could put out. We've kept this at a very conservative level for the reason we wanted to have something that we were confident in being able to deliver. And there were some I suppose issues around things like the NPV. The NPV was 613 Australian dollars, which is $1 million, which is that's an impressive number, and we were comfortable with that number, but it was less than our PFS. But a major factor in that was the exchange rate. Simple as that. The exchange rate changed, and in fact, since we released the DFS between then and now, we've actually added potentially another $60 million to our NPV. So that's how much the market's changing around at the moment.
So you talked about kind of the care that you've gone into sizing it. You've got you've got in the DFS, you've got 15 million tons of reserves, proven and probable. You've got 15 million tons which are going to get mined, and it's over 28 years. My simple math is it's around 500,000 tons per annum, and yet the feasibility shows that it's in 4 stages, and the first stage has got a capex of, what is it, 94 million dollars to start. Can you just, for my benefit, kind of explain how it goes from in 4 stages, and why did you choose 500,000 tons a year as a throughput rate?
Yep. So the idea was to use this DFS to release a study as a staged process, and we wanted to stage it because the world's an uncertain place right now. We wanted to de-risk it as much as possible. So we used a 4-stage approach, what we call in the crawl, walk, run approach. Whereas we want to start at crawling, and we want to make sure that when we get things like we get the top off the ground, we know exactly what's in there. We get the channels to market set up. We get the relationships with customers set up. We get the branding out there in the market and recognition. But we want to do that without going too big too soon. So we staged it appropriately, and also to reduce the capex. So the capital mined up the front, we wanted to minimize that. We didn't want to have to go back, tap the market again for large amounts of money, because shareholders are very sensitive to any dilution. So we really try to structure this to keep our shareholders happy on side, and make them understand we were trying to look after them, but also trying to get this business going as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So the first stage, we actually start about 300,000 tons a year of mining. So it's below that 500,000 you mentioned. So 300,000 tons of feed, which gives us approximately 150,000 tons of product. And the first stage will be 2 products, which is important to mention, because the main product is what we're calling our KCM90, which is a semi-refined, or some people would treat it as a fully refined product. And this is something that we wanted to get in the market quickly. We saw a gap in the market for a very high quality premium halloysite kaolin, which is what we have, and a big demand for that. And we've realized that if we produced a material that was refined to this level, it's much easier to make. It's got a high recovery, it's got a higher throughput, and it's got lower specifications on the end product. And yet, when it goes to market, there's a far broader market for this material, because customers out there, there's 3 types of customers out there who want it right now. There's customers out there with processing plants themselves. So they've got kaolin processing plants, but they've got no premium grade material to process. So they want to buy it from us to process themselves, to upgrade it to a truly premium grade for highest value.
Yep.
They also, a second customer, they have got kaolin plants or processing plants, and they've got a feed material, poor quality, and they want to add our material into it. So it upgrades the whole of their resource. And then they will process that and be able to make a much higher grade, higher value material. And then the third type of customer we've got are people who decided they can use it directly as is. So this material can be used primarily in ceramics, so very high quality ceramics, and it's now been approved for use directly in things like glaze and very high quality tiles, which are very big markets around the world and growing rapidly as well. So that means we have a product we're producing at a rate of about somewhere around about 130, 140,000 tons a year of that particular grade.
Okay.
That allows us to get into those markets, get those relationships established, get the product out there. And once people realize how good it is, how consistent it is, then the demand will increase, and also that put pressure on the market, which allows us to even get even better prices than we've got. In the DFS, we used the lowest price in the market we found in our DFS, again, being very conservative. So we've started at the base case, lowest price, a lower amount of output. But then that's the first stage. And the second product we have during that first stage is what we're calling our Great White HRM, which is our concrete additive material. Now, this material is interesting because we've got a patent application in for this. It's been certified for use in concrete. It gives a very interesting combination of performance improvements, handling improvements, cost savings, and carbon footprint reductions. So all the things that people in the concrete construction industry want right now. And since we got the DFS out, we've been working with commercial partners to get some offtakes for that material. And I can tell you that hot off the press, we've just signed an LOI with the world's biggest supplier of mineral additives and chemical additives. This is a truly global customer, a company that supplies the whole world, multi-billion-dollar turnover. They've just signed a LOI with us for exclusivity to distribute this product initially around Asia Pacific, but that could well spread. So that's exciting development, and that material looks like it's going to be a very interesting one for us, because no one else has got that. No one else.
And that's kind of 10 to 20,000 tons per annum. That's the balance, which isn't the KCM90.
Correct. It's a balance. We're going to ramp that up. It's a new product going to the market, so it needs a sort of steady ramp up. But it is high margin. It's high margin. The secret to that one is getting the right feed material, and this is a very specific area within our 15 million ton reserve. We have a specific area of the halloysite kaolin, and the halloysite component is very important in that. That gives us the reactivity in concrete. We've also found, though, that since we released the DFS, we found that product works in a whole range of other applications. So we're now looking at using it as an additive for chemicals, and even an additive for drilling fluids, where it seems to be working very well. So that one, we're confident that will grow, but we've kept that low in the DFS, and we will expand that, ideally expand that faster than is indicated in that ramp up.
Okay, so I've got two kind of questions, almost geological questions. The first one is, you talk about the Great White Project having halloysite and this the ability to produce a high-grade kaolin that other plants can't. Is there some geological feature about the granite on which the kaolin has formed, which is not present in other granites? And so that's the first question, and I'll let you answer that before I ask the second question.
Yeah, so halloysite it's quite an unusual form of kaolinite. It's not unusual in its occurrence. You can find particles in most kaolin deposits and resources around the world, but what you don't find is any significant amounts of the halloysite, because what they are, they're rolled up tubes of the kaolin plates, so they roll up into natural nanotubes. And to get a large concentration of those in a high purity deposit is very rare in the world. In fact, there's no one in the world now who's commercially producing large amounts of this material in the form that's required for nanotechnology development. So we are quite unique in what we have, and geologically, you need the kaolin first. That gives you the basis, but then what you normally need is very acidic water that's actually in paleochannels around that resource. That very acidic water has to sit around for a very long time, when we could be talking millions of years in that kaolin deposit, and that will cause the halloysite to form. and its natural nanotubes to form. And that's what makes a difference. In our Great White resource and our reserve, we have a very high concentration of high purity halloysite. We have areas, large areas where it goes up to about 60% halloysite in the -45 micron fraction. But across the whole resource, it's generally about 20%. But what we also have in the Great White resource is an area with zero halloysite, which is interesting, which shows you the complexity of the halloysite story. And that's got zero halloysite, but it's super high purity kaolin, incredibly high purity, the highest I've seen in 34 years in the business. And that's what we were going to use. That's what we use in our stage 4 of the ramp up, which is our paint grade material, our Great White PRM.
Okay, so just a couple of questions. One is that if you've had these acidic waters for a long period of time, there must be some kind of recharge of some acid generation for that long period of time, because otherwise they would just neutralize over time, I should imagine. But so presumably that your geologists have kind of come up with the various theories for how the halloysite is so prevalent in this instance.
Yeah, so we found when we first started work on this, on the Great White and surrounding area, it was a big learning process for our geologists. Now, I've been involved in kaolin for over 30 years, but not much in halloysite. I knew about it, been involved with it on and off, but only because it's so rare, not to any great extent, and it's still very much of an unknown science about the halloysite. But we've learned a great deal, and our geologists now are very experienced in the formation, the exploration, the analysis of halloysite. We developed our own technique for analyzing it that is far more accurate than previous techniques, because it's a very difficult thing to do. And we've also learned to identify where we might better find large resources of halloysite in the future. And on that basis, we are out now drilling as we speak. We're drilling now, and we've got exploration targets now of about 700 million tons. So huge targets that we're aiming at. And we're, I suppose we're optimistic. We're not saying too much, that we have identified areas where we believe we will find very large amounts of certainly very high purity kaolin and possibly very high purity halloysite as well.
Excellent, thank you. Because that was kind of, I was leading on to those two questions. The one is kind of metallurgical mapping and zonation, and it's not enough. And how do you do it? Because you're dealing with these kind of ultra fine clays. Presumably, there's nothing visual that geologists in the field can use. Is it all done at a microscopic level? How do you do your mineral mapping over the resource? Is that fiendishly complex, or have you got some? Have you cracked the code that can be done at the project scale?
Yeah, so it has been, so it's called, fiendishly difficult for a while, because the only way to do it historically is to use X-ray diffraction techniques, and it's a very special one just for halloysite, because kaolinite, halloysite, they're identical in terms of chemistry and mineralogy. It's just the shape. It's just a polymorph. So to analyze that and quantify it is extremely difficult. Now you can see it under a scanning electron microscope, but there's no way you can get a resource worked out on that.
No.
So what we found was that the conventional technique that's been used for 30 years probably to using X-ray diffraction didn't actually work very well. And there were some complicating factors in there that it worked on some halloysite, and other halloysite you gave completely wrong results. So we worked very hard on developing a new technique. I don't want to say too much, because we've developed it in-house and it works beautifully, and it's cut the turnaround time for a set of samples to be analyzed previously was about 3 months for a set of drill samples. Very long time. We've cut that down to about 3 days.
And you can do that at the site. So can you create a map? Can you create sections and geological maps of where the halloysite is and where the kaolin is? And can you contour things so that you can do a kind of a mineralogical map of the kaolin?
We have. So we've got a block model now, and our chief geologist is very good on modeling. So he has got a block model of the whole resource, and it's modeled on a number of different factors. One is halloysite concentration. So it's a heat map with the different colors across the whole resource, and also down in 3D. So we've got that done now, and we've got a technique where we've got a handheld piece of equipment that we can measure the halloysite content in the field now. And this is quite new. We're just using it at the moment. And this is something that we're going to use once we start operations, which is not too far away now, because to do QA, QC based on halloysite content would be impossible without a very rapid, easy technique to use. And up till now, that's been impossible. And in fact, no one in the world's done it, as far as we know, until now. So we've got this new technique. It's going to help us tremendously. And also, as we're going out drilling these new resources, we can get some really reliable numbers right away as soon as we drill holes and pull the material out. And the other very complicated factor is that for the halloysite kaolin that goes into concrete and there's other new applications, it's also an additional test that has to be applied there, because it's not just the halloysite and the kaolin, it's also the surface chemistry. So we've had to develop another test, first of all to find the halloysite kaolin, and secondly to find the right surface chemistry.
Sorry, by surface chemistry, what do you refer to? What do you mean?
So the reactivity. So there's a certain reactivity that, combined with the halloysite content, gives you this amazing performance when you put it into high solid slurries. And the surface chemistry test, and again, I don't want to give too much away because this is something that we've developed in-house. And it's certainly something very exciting, because anyone involved in the halloysite kaolin and the kaolin industry would be very keen to find out what's going on here, because it's such a strong effect and potentially so valuable in a whole lot of applications that we want to protect that value. We're pretty confident that there's no one else that we know of in the world that's got the sort of resource we have, but it's certainly something we want to now keep our hands on and expand that, because that's a very, very interesting domestic market there, a very high value market domestically. But if it works in Australia, it'll work anywhere in the world. And we're confident that this company we just signed up with with an LOI as a distributor, they want to distribute this through the whole of Asia Pacific. They can see the opportunities here. So that's something that's very exciting.
Help me out here. I'm getting my head around this. So kaolin is a clay that forms from the weathering of a feldspar. And when you've got a granite that weathers down, the quartz grains are resistant and they stay there. And the feldspars, all the biotite and all the other stuff gets kind of washed away. There might be a bit of tourmaline, a bit of boron in there, but which may change the mix a bit. But essentially, the feldspar turns into a white clay, which is a kaolin. Then some of it gets rolled up into little nanotubes, which is the halloysite. And then there's another overlay, which is the surface chemistry, which I haven't got my head around yet. But when you process it, you mine 500,000 tons, 300,000 tons to start off with. And you effectively, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get the quartz washed out to one side and the clays come to the other side. How do you separate the halloysite from the kaolin platelets? And how do you separate that into products? And what's the relationship between the active surface chemistry with the different minerals? Was it a subset of the halloysite, or is it some of that is sitting in the kaolin and some of it's sitting in the halloysite?
Yeah, so quite a bit to unpack there in that question. Those questions. But you've struck on a very important factor, a feature of this whole business, that purification of the halloysite is something that's very interesting, because halloysite as a pure mineral will sell for $5,000 a ton. Very, very high value. That's about 10, 20 times what you get for an average grade kaolin. So if we can get a pure halloysite, then that's worth an absolute fortune. And so we are looking at purifying it, but there's two ways to approach that. You either find a resource of high purity and then just remove the sand, because the sand's about 50%, which is the unkaolinized part of the granite, or you find a way to purify it. And the only way is that you can potentially purify it is to use gravity, so gravity separation techniques. And we have, at the moment, a $1 million pilot plant that our team are working very hard on purifying techniques to purify halloysite at the moment. We've got a very large centrifuge there, which is an industrial kaolin centrifuge that we source from UK. We've got hydrocyclones from Germany, and we are set up very well there to be able to purify it. At the moment, we are working on the purification, because we don't just want the ability to sell the halloysite for $5,000 a ton, but we also want that for our nanotechnologies. The higher purity that we have of the halloysite, then that means the better our nanotechnologies will work. So that's something we're working very hard. But having said that, we know that there's areas in our resources at the moment that are very high halloysite anyway. And the drilling that we're doing at the moment, I mentioned that we're targeting about 700 million tons of exploration of halloysite and halloysite kaolin. Well, one of the areas we're targeting is our resource called Bronze Whaler, which we previously found 90% purity halloysite there. And so we're going back there to see if we can find any more of that. And it's a very interesting fact that all halloysite doesn't behave the same way when you try and purify it. So some types of halloysite, because it varies in the dimensions, the length of the tubes, the diameter of the tubes, the surface chemistry, it doesn't behave the same way when you try and purify it. So some will purify very well and some won't purify at all. Now you can use exactly the same technique and you'll get zero response in some cases, but with another type of halloysite from a different area, you get a very strong response. So this is some stuff we've worked through for the last 3 years. It makes it interesting, but also more challenging.
My goodness. And this is all ultra fine. It's all sub minus 45 microns. I mean, this is all very, very fine. And therefore the gravity response must be slow. I mean, these ultra fines respond very, very slow. They're slow to respond in a fluid.
That's right. So the 2 micron particles are predominantly of what the halloysite are. So it's even much finer than the 45 microns. We're talking about 2 micron particles here generally. And you're right. It's gravitationally it responds very slowly. So that's why we have to use centrifuge and hydrocyclones. No, centrifuge. The one we have spins at 4,000 times a minute. So very high gravitational forces are being used there. And what you can do is, by using those forces, you can engineer the particle size distribution. So you can cut the particle size distribution at certain points, for example, plus 10 microns or minus 2 microns or minus 1 micron even. And then what you do is you find the right fraction of that distribution that houses the halloysite. And then you can take that out and then dewater it, and you have your high purity halloysite. So we're actually working through an exercise right now where we're producing a ton of very high purity halloysite for our carbon capture plant that we've just constructed and built, and it's on its way. It should be arriving next week from India. This carbon capture plant needs a ton of very high purity halloysite, and we're well on the way to finishing production of that. And so this is another exciting development that I said it's worth $5,000 a ton as a pure mineral. But it can be upgraded, and the ultimate upgrade is to something that it would be used in things like air purification in submarines and spacecraft, where there's materials there being used right now that sell for $3 million a ton, and our material is about 5 times better than that based on our testing to date. So there's a very interesting opportunity here to upgrade to the carbon capture section of the business. And also we think that we're going to have the ability to contribute to decarbonisation of the world greatly by this technology.
Goodness, there's so many things going on. How does the pilot plant fit in relative to the development schedule of the kind of the general Great White project?
So the pilot plant at the moment is at Streaky Bay, which is near the mine site, the future mine site. What we plan to do, though, we plan to upgrade that pilot plant. So at the moment, it's capable of producing hundreds of kilos or maybe even a ton amount of material. So we're going to upgrade that as part of our next stage as the move to operational start. So we want that pilot plant to be able to produce tens of tons, hundreds of tons, or even maybe a couple of thousands of tons of material. And it's going to be fairly easy to do. We know exactly what we need. We just got to size the equipment. That will give us the opportunity to produce large amounts of pure halloysite and also large amounts of the concrete additive and variants of that additive that can go into these other applications. That'll give us the chance to get container loads out or truck loads out to customers and get the market established, because we have people ready to pay money right now for those products. They've tested them, they've approved them, and they want supply. So this is a way of getting the material out there, start that supply. And then by the time the big plant gets into operation, then it should be a very smooth transition because they're already used to using the materials, and it's just scaling up the amount of use of those materials.
And one of the questions I wanted to ask earlier was about the ability for you to continue to supply the high quality additive material, but I think you've answered that with the metallurgical mapping and the exploration that you're looking to do, and particularly around bronze whaler. And within that 700 million ton target, you've presumably got enough line of sight to be able to say, we can supply you now and for the next few years, and there's every chance that we can continue to supply that in the future.
That's correct. So the concrete additive material, which is the special one, then at the moment we have about 600,000 tons of that material. So we've got a lot to keep us going for a few years there, based on our forecast ramp up. But we are now using this new equipment, our new techniques to expand that within Great White. So we're confident we've got a lot more within Great White itself, but we also believe that we're going to find this material in probably much larger amounts in these other target areas, because we know the geology, the water, and all the geological conditions there are just right for producing not just the concrete additive material, but also high purity halloysite.
We'll get onto the nanotechnologies, but before we do that, can you just tell me about what the plan is in terms of financing, construction, permitting, the route to Great White, big stage 1 timelines and milestones, please?
Yeah, so planning wise, we got our mining lease granted at the end of last year. So that was a major milestone for us. Now that is the government, South Australian government, saying these minerals should be extracted. We've got a commercial economic resource there that needs to be removed for the state approves that. So that was the end of last December. Now that means that we just have now to finish the environmental sign-off, which is well underway now. It's in South Australia. It's called the PEPA, which is the environmental sign-off of the mine. And this is just writing a mining plan to meet the conditions they've given us. And the conditions they gave us were far less onerous than we expected. So this should be just a formality to get that done. Now, things were slowed down a bit by COVID, mainly on the government side. That they had other priorities, a lot of issues in running and dealing with managing mine site issues around South Australia. So we lost a bit of time on that. But we should be having PEPA should go in June, and then the government then has to approve that. It can take a couple of months to do that. It can take a bit longer. So we say at some point second half this year, we will have the environmental sign-off. So once that's achieved, that means that we have the go-ahead. And so that should all be done by second half this year.
And then you're into financing.
And then we have to decide, so we use this base case for the DFS. We are working on a few opportunities in the background now, because once the DFS was released, we had a number of parties that were keen to look at working with us. And these are people who are in the right sector, the same sector. So we have opportunities there to possibly team up with someone else. And we also now have the ability to really focus in on those costs for the DFS. I say it was conservative. We put in very high numbers there. We used a WA company to price it up for us. So what we can be assured of is that's the worst case scenario, and we're confident that we can optimize that probably quite significantly over the next few weeks and months. So we're looking at moving towards ordering long lead items fairly soon, because that's the next thing that's on the critical path for the project schedule. Now, the world of logistics and supply has changed as well over the last few months, and not easy to get. So we've identified what the key items that we need are, and we're going to order those first. And that's we're now going through the final stages of what we know what we want to order, but we want to work out how soon we need it so it doesn't affect our timelines at all. So that's in progress at the moment as well. And in our last capital raise, we identified the amount of money we're going to use to order those long lead items. So that's all moving ahead. And we're now just trying to work out where we want to get to in the time required to make the final financial investment decision. But it looks like at the moment we're in a very strong position to move that forward quickly. And certainly part of my next 3 weeks, whilst I'm here in Europe, I'm talking to some very interesting people who can see the benefits of getting involved with a company like Andromeda that has got a very de-risked project now. We've got a mineral that is growing in demand and reducing in supply around the world, and we've had this huge potential upside. So I think there's a lot of interest there that I'll be talking to people, and we'll see what happens over the next few weeks and months. But certainly some very interesting times ahead there.
Yeah, absolutely. So potentially FID, possibly even this year, but more likely first half of next year.
I think we're talking about this year. No, we don't want to. We want to be producing next year. Now, if all goes to plan, we'll be actually operating and supplying customers next year. So the build time, once we order the components, we're talking about 3 months to 6 months to build and commission. It's not complicated technology. It's conventional technology. It's been around for decades. There are some optimizations now and some upgraded bits of the gear, but it's nothing new. It's not rocket science at all. So
it's a sophisticated wash plant.
Yeah, it's a sand removal plant. That's right. And it's historically people would take the sand and sell that as a product and throw the kaolin away. We're the opposite. Our sand isn't really particularly valuable. It's a good construction grade sand, but not worth much in the market at the moment. So that goes back in the hole. We use progressive rehabilitation as we move forward, and then we just dry, refine, and dewater the kaolin and sell that. And we don't have any nasty chemicals. We don't have any tailings dams, so it's very low impact. So it's very it's socially acceptable form of mining.
I like to think that all mining these days is getting to be more socially acceptable, but perhaps there are some categories which are still out there. But thank you. That's really useful. Can we talk about the nanotechnologies side of the business, please?
Yeah, certainly. So this is a very exciting area of our business. Now, the Great White project itself, that's going to be our foundation of the nanotechnologies. So that's going to give us what we need to commercialize the nanotechnologies, and also it'll feed the halloysite into technologies. So we've got a whole range of nanotechnologies we're working on. We're working very closely with the University of Newcastle that has a global innovation center for nanotechnology. We're funding at the moment over $1 million a year of research, and that's been going on for many years now. And we've
in the UK, Newcastle in the UK.
No, sorry, I said Newcastle, New South Wales. So
okay.
This is the other side of the world. Much more convenient for us.
Yep.
And there's a world-leading team there of people working in nanotechnologies, and we've got 12 different opportunities there we're working on. But we've got 6 core opportunities that we're really focused on at this point in time. And these technologies are ones that we feel the world needs right now and the world's looking for right now, and solutions to some real global issues. And first of those is decarbonization. Now, I think everybody in the world now is aware how important it is to decarbonize. And we've been developing over the last probably 3 years this process to use the halloysite, so we can activate the halloysite with a special activation system, produce a polymeric matrix that can be used to filter out carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, or probably more likely to filter it out from industrial processes, so from waste gases and flue gases. So we've got a system that can extract the carbon dioxide. It can extract very large amounts. We're looking at getting towards 2 tons of carbon dioxide for 1 ton of the halloysite matrix material. And this is a cyclic process. So it's a plant that we've designed, the university's designed with us, that's got 2 chambers. One chamber will absorb the CO2 and one will discharge it. So it will operate continuously, and it will operate for over long periods using the same material. So it doesn't get consumed. We can keep using it. And the very important feature for us, and our unique point here that we have, is that we can convert that fuel, so we can convert that carbon dioxide to a fuel. So as far as we know, no one else in the world has this ability. We can convert the CO2 that we capture using another nanotechnology that's been developed to a methane. So that will completely close the carbon loop. So someone could attach this plant to their flue gas that's emitting lots of carbon dioxide. We can capture all that carbon dioxide and convert that to a fuel, methane, which can then go back and be used in the same process as a fuel source. So this is very exciting, and we've got some very strong interest from around the world now. And we're making progress with sectors including oil and gas industry, the cement industry, and chemical production industries. So that's
really interesting.
Yeah, and as I mentioned before, we got a plant that has been built in India. It got delayed badly due to COVID, but it's now arriving. As far as I know, it's arriving in 5 days' time into Newcastle, and then the plan is to get that up and running as a demonstration plant as quickly as possible. This is quite a large plant. It's not a small piece of equipment by any means. It's about 5 meters tall, about 10 meters square base, and this will be something that we can bring these people to come and visit and have a look at it, see how it operates, see how efficient it is. And it's something that can be scaled very easily, and scaled and then sold or licensed around the whole world to all sorts of applications. Any industrial process producing carbon dioxide can use this. So that's our lead project. But what we also have is we've developed processes to either use the halloysite in its own right as an activated material by using its very high surface area, its unique structure, and its surface chemistry to do things like purify the air and reduce carbon dioxide. But also we can use it as a mold or a template to produce nanocarbons at very low cost. So this is interesting because we can produce currently a nanocarbon from our halloysite with about a surface area of about 2,000 square meters per gram, which is a huge surface area for a very small amount of material. And then we can then activate that surface area to allow it to do all sorts of exciting things. And what we're working on now and where we're getting progress in is areas of hydrogen storage and transport. Batteries, we can use it in battery anodes, and we're getting currently about 5 times improvement in lithium-ion battery performance by using our nanocarbons. It's probably important to mention that we've measured this material and compared it directly with things like graphene and with carbon nanotubes, which are very expensive, difficult materials to make, and we outperform those by quite a considerable amount. So we get some tremendous results in those. Also water purification. So it can be used to purify water and used in antimicrobial, antiviral applications. So it's another area of research we're working on. And the tubes as well, nanotubes can be used in agricultural applications. So we've got a project running with $2.4 million of government funding to use the halloysite to do a number of things. One is to retain moisture in the soil to improve productivity, but also to deliver herbicides and fertilizer by using the tubes as a controlled delivery device. So that's happening now, and it's progressing very well. And the last one the main one we've got funding for the moment is to remove microplastics from the ocean. So we can use the halloysite structure and chemistry, and we've developed a technique that can cause the microplastics in the ocean to agglomerate together in a large mass and then be extracted and recycled. So another very topical subject is the microplastics now are getting worse and worse. So we're covering a lot of areas there in our technologies. Now we're covering decarbonisation, we're covering hydrogen energy, we're covering batteries, agriculture, and purification of oceans.
You've been busy bees.
Oh yes, never a dull moment.
never a dull moment. I've looked at hundreds, thousands of gold companies and copper companies, and I'm quite comfortable about valuing them. As an analyst or as an investor, I look at these companies. I think, and there are peers that I can look at, and I can say, oh, it's cheap relative to this one. There's a universe in which I can calibrate my expectations of value or the share price for a company. How does one go about valuing Andromeda? Yeah,
it's a good question. I think that's why we've had some strange market reactions, because now people get very excited about what we have, as a future upside, and they get a bit confused about what we have as a strong commercial, mature business case. And because we're not something like gold, so you have gold is easy. You have a gram amount per ton. You have a size of resource, and you can work out the numbers quite easily. Now our situation is very different, and the market doesn't necessarily understand that very well. And certainly in Australia, it's been a big problem in Australia because kaolin really hasn't been commercialized in that part of the world due to that reason. It's not understood. It's usually the value is too low to make it of any economic value, and there's too many other precious metals or base metals around that are far more exciting. But to value us, what we've used for our DFS, and what you see in numbers coming out of DFS is we've got a resource size there, very large resource, very high purity, very consistent resource. It's got a value in the market. And if I know it's a dangerous thing to do, but if you compared it with a gold deposit, for example, we're talking about something like 1.5 to 2 grams of gold, except we've got a 34 million ton resource there at that value. So it's when you compare it side by side and the amount of investment required to get that commercialized, we're talking about 90 million, which is there's a lot of fat built into that. It's actually a very interesting proposition just on that base case, and it's very commercial and very mature business, because that material has been used industrially now for over 1,000 years. So it's nothing new. The people who use it, they know it very well. They want more of it. That's growing. It grows on year. The price never goes down. It just goes up and up, or stays stable. There's been probably 30 years of increases in price. Now, it never lights the world on fire. It goes up maybe 3 or 4% per year, but it just keeps going up. So it means very little volatility.
So you're effectively saying, look at it on a financial basis. So do the financial numbers, look at the capital in, look at the EBITDA that will be producing, which from your feasibility study was 82 million Aussie a year. Why is the payback just under 6 years?
Yeah, so that was another question that came up after the DFS came out. And I think this is something that was misunderstood, because in the pre-FS, we had a payback of 18 months. So that was much shorter, but a very different case. Now, what we have with the DFS, we actually start making money in year 2. So we're into profit in year 2. But what we're doing is, because we're using this staged approach, we're rolling the profit back into the expansions as we go through the stages. So this is to protect the shareholders and keep the value for the shareholders. So we keep reinvesting our profit back into the mine, into expansion. And we end up with the free cash flow is spectacular. We got 3 years, we're talking about $80 million of free cash flow. And with an NPV of 600 million odd, it would be 700 plus if it wasn't for the exchange rate and so on. Then, where we sit now with our market cap around about 300, about 50% of that. Now that is probably where we should be, just based on the Great White DFS at the moment. No, it's not. It's fairly close. But what's not factored into that is all the nanotechnologies and all the potential upside there. Plus, we've got now our metals projects that they're not factored in either. So the copper, the gold, and the rare earths. So there's a lot of other upside there. So getting a value on it is quite tricky, and I think that's why we've seen some bit of a wild swing in the share price recently, because people are finding it hard to understand that, and also understand what business we're actually in. But the fact is that it's a very, very stable business, the industrial minerals, and it's a business that is a business of the future. These minerals are going to be required in larger and larger amounts for decarbonisation and renewable energy. So we're confident that our resources, which are going to be growing dramatically over the next few weeks and months, are going to be some very valuable materials, and there'll be something that's probably in short supply in the world. Now, there's already the biggest mines in the world for halloysite kaolin have shut down, and they want our material to process. We could sell all of our production. We could sell that as DSO and make some money, but that will be giving the value away. So we decided not to do that. Now, we looked at it very closely, and it looked like it was attractive. No, it was just dig a hole and ship it off and make some money. But we want to capture as much value as possible. And we know that this material is in demand now, and it's only going to grow and grow. So as a company, we feel that our future is extremely bright, just based on the Great White. If you start to factor in the success in the carbon capture area, and we feel that that's not far away now. We've got some multi-billion-dollar corporations looking closely at that technology. And as pressure comes on, carbon trading, spreads around the world, then we've got something here that's very unique, something that can turn carbon dioxide into something that's valuable, not just remove it. So we think that the upside here is potentially very, very large. And I haven't even talked about our high purity alumina project that we're working on as well. And that's something that's very interesting in its own right.
I think we're going to have to save that for another time. But James, thank you so much. It's been a fascinating kind of journey for me. I've learned so much about your company and about kaolin, about the nanotechnologies. Good luck with the year ahead. I look forward to seeing the environmental approval sometime in the second half of the year, and the FID, and just general news flow from Andromeda. Yeah, lots of exciting stuff going on.
Yeah, thanks, Merlin. It's been great. And you're right, there's a lot of very good news to come in the second half of this year and next few months. I think it will be very exciting for anyone who's involved with us.